Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In the United States, President Donald Trump has reiterated claims that widespread voter fraud has marred the presidential election. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said he could easily win if legal votes are counted. His Democratic rival Joe Biden has appealed for calm and said he would be declared the winner. The final result hinges on 5 key states of Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, where vote counting still continues. In occupied Kashmir, Indian forces martyred 2 more youths during a military raid in the Pulwama district. This comes as Kashmiris across the world are observing the Jammu Martyrs' Day to hail the sacrifices of Muslims in the November 1947 massacre. Azerbaijan says Armenian Air Force has once again targeted civilian areas as the fighting of the disputed NAGORNO-KARABAKH rages. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. Over 1,000 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. In Central America, more than 70 people have died as Hurricane Eta unleashed torrential rains and catastrophic flooding in the region. Authorities say the storm has forced tens of thousands of people to leave their homes for shelters, while hundreds are stranded on rooftops or cut off by the floods. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In the United States, President Donald Trump has reiterated claims that a widespread fraud has marred the presidential election. This comes as his lead in the battleground states of Georgia and Pennsylvania continues to shrink during the counting of the postal votes.
Vote counting continues in the 5 key states of Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, where a winner has yet to emerge. But it seems President Donald Trump is in no mood to concede to the Democrat Joe Biden. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said he could easily win if legal votes are counted.
And we think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this. And
Democratic rival Joe Biden has appealed for calm and again expressed confidence he would be declared the winner.
In America, the vote is sacred. It's how people of this nation express their will. And it is the will of the voters, no one, not anything else, that chooses the President of the United States of America. So, each ballot must be counted, and that's what we're going to see going through now, and that's how it should be. Democracy is sometimes messy. It sometimes requires a little patience as well.
Currently, Biden is projected to have won 264 electoral votes, while Trump is at 214. The race goes to the contender with 270 electoral votes. Overall, turnout is projected to be the highest in 120 years at 66.9%, and the final result could take days to come.
In occupied Kashmir, Indian forces have martyred 2 more youths during a military raid in Pulwama district. This comes as Kashmiris across the world are observing the Jammu Martyrs' Day to hail the sacrifices of the Muslims in November 1947 massacre.
Hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris were massacred by the forces of Maharaja Hari Singh and Hindu extremists in Jammu while they were migrating to Pakistan in the first week of November 1947. Hundreds of Muslim women were raped and molested. The all-parties Hurriyat Conference termed the tragedy as the worst kind of genocide in human history. Hurriyat leaders say the fascist Indian government wants to repeat the same sad story in occupied Kashmir. They also organized a prayer meeting to mark the day while renewing the pledge to thwart the Indian oppression. Azad Kashmir's president Sardar Masood Khan says the murderous campaign of Hindu extremists against Muslims hasn't stopped yet.
We mark November the 6th, 1947 as the darkest day in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. On that day, and in the months of October and November 1947, the Dogra Army, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and the Indian National Army massacred 237,000 Muslims. This was the first genocide after the Second World War on such a massive scale. From November the 4th to November the 6th, Muslim population of Jammu, Kathua, Udhampur and Riyasi were viciously targeted and attacked. Tens of thousands of people were duped into believing that they were being transported to Pakistan, but near Samba, at the Jammu-Sialkot road, they were all butchered mercilessly.
The region has been under a strict curfew since India revoked its autonomy in August last year. 23 people have been martyred by the occupation forces in October alone.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Afghanistan, at least 3 people have been killed and 17 others wounded in 2 back-to-back explosions in the northern province of Balkh. Officials say the bombs were placed inside the vehicle and the guest house of a pro-government commander. The Taliban have claimed the responsibility for the attacks.
Although the Afghan government and the Taliban launched unprecedented peace talks in September, fighting has raged across the country. A U.S. report says violence has claimed 876 lives in the past 3 months to the end of September. Attacks against civilians were 50% higher when compared with the previous quarter. The government blames the Taliban for targeting civilians, but the group accuses Kabul of being complicit in attacks carried out by ISIS. On Monday, at least 22 students were killed at Kabul University in an attack claimed by ISIS. Pakistan and the United States have reiterated calls for restraint amid the fears of violence that may jeopardize negotiations.
Azerbaijan says the Armenian Air Force has once again targeted civilian areas as the fighting over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh rages. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. Earlier, President Ilham Aliyev said his troops advanced to the positions just below the city of Shushi. The city is considered as a strategic fortress and a key to get control over the disputed region. Over 1,000 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. The Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed 2 explosive-laden drones launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels. In a statement, it said the drones were launched at civilian targets in the kingdom. The Houthis regularly fire ballistic missiles and drones towards Saudi areas in response to coalition airstrikes on areas held by the rebels. In 2015, the coalition intervened in Yemen after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government. Tens of thousands of people are believed to have been killed in the conflict. Turkey has criticized Israel's move to demolish more than 70 Palestinian homes in the occupied Jordan Valley. In a statement, the foreign ministry said Israel's unlawful and inhumane acts are jeopardizing chances for peace.
As the world keenly watches the presidential election in the United States, its all-weather friend continues to build its hegemony in the occupied West Bank. Turkey's foreign ministry says Israel has demolished 690 structures across the West Bank so far this year. This has led to the displacement of some 850 Palestinians in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Last month, Israel approved the construction of more than 2,000 settler homes in the West Bank. In a bid to double down on its plans, Israel stopped issuing visas to United Nations human rights workers in Palestine. Israeli settlements are deemed as illegal under the international law. The international community and the United Nations have repeatedly called on Israel to put an end to its expansionist policies.
In Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to continue a military offensive in the northern state of Tigray amid concerns it could descend into a civil conflict. In a televised address, Abiy said the offensive follows a deadly attack on a military camp. Tensions between the state and the federal government have risen in recent months. The Tigrayan president said his region is in a state of war. The state's governing party was once at the center of power in Ethiopia, but since Abiy became prime minister in 2018, it has been increasingly marginalized. The U.S. has reported a record COVID-19 daily cases of over 118,000 for the second consecutive day, pushing the tally past 9.6 million. Globally, the number of deaths has exceeded 1.2 million, with over 48.6 million cases. More in this report.
With over 10 months into the COVID-19, hopes for the pandemic ending anytime soon are becoming dimmer. 17 of the United States have reported record one-day increases in new infections. In addition to the rising coronavirus cases, hospitalizations of COVID-19 patients rose for the 11th consecutive day to over 52,000. About the economic situation in the country, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell believes it will need further stimulus to survive.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have taken forceful actions to provide relief and stability, to ensure that the recovery will be as strong as possible, and to limit lasting damage to the economy. Today, my colleagues on the Federal Open Market Committee and I reaffirmed our commitment to support the economy in this challenging time.
The second wave of the outbreak continues to batter Europe. Greece has reported record-high daily cases and deaths, while Denmark is set to impose tougher lockdown measures after discovering a mutated coronavirus strand in the country's northern parts. In Spain, the healthcare system is acutely strained as it becomes the fourth European country to surpass the 38,000 death toll. Matters in Belgium and Poland are no different, with hospitals set to run out of ICU beds really soon as cases spike.
It's not that the hospital do not want to take patients. They have nowhere to put them. They do not have beds at ward. A patient suspected of having been infected could be isolated from those who have not been infected.
Over in Asia, India has registered 670 deaths overnight, increasing the tally to nearly 125,000, with more than 8.4 million cases. Meanwhile, China has barred entry of non-Chinese travelers from Britain, France, Belgium, the Philippines, and India.
Pakistan has reported 30 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 1,376 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the death toll in Pakistan has reached nearly 7,000. It said the number of active cases in the country is over 16,000. More than 317,000 patients have recovered so far across the country. It said 830 patients remain critical. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam has held meetings with the central governmental officials to discuss anti-coronavirus efforts. Lam is on a 3-day trip to Beijing. She said the central government has welcomed her proposals regarding a coronavirus relief package. Lam said Beijing is also willing to sponsor the technological innovation in Hong Kong. There have been 107 deaths and over 5,300 infections in the city. Kosovo's former president Hashim Thaçi has been arrested over charges of war crimes in the 1990s War of Independence. He has been transferred to the detention facilities of a special tribunal in The Hague. Thaçi said his allies are accused of committing nearly 100 murders and other atrocities against various ethnicities. He resigned on Thursday after learning the tribunal had confirmed a war crimes indictment against him. The Hague-based court is governed by Kosovo law, but is staffed by international judges and prosecutors. Britain has called for a new presidential election in Belarus amid protests over alleged rigging in August poll. This comes after an independent report said that there have been massive and systematic human rights violations in response to the protests. Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said those responsible for the crackdown must be held accountable. In a statement, he said London condemns the efforts made by Minsk to undermine the independent investigation. Belarusian opposition leader Svitlana Tikhanovskaya had previously set out an ultimatum for President Alexander Lukashenko to step down, but the president refused to do so, denying allegations of any wrongdoing in the election. In Libya, at least 14 unidentified dead bodies have been unearthed in mass graves discovered in Tarhuna city near capital Tripoli. Authorities say 112 bodies have been unearthed from mass graves since June. Libya's internationally recognized government and Eastern forces have repeatedly accused each other of committing mass killings. The two sides have been engaged in a deadly armed conflict for more than a year in and around Tripoli. In Central America, more than 70 people have died as Hurricane Eta unleashed torrential rains and catastrophic flooding in the region. Authorities say the storm has forced tens of thousands of people to leave their homes for shelters, while hundreds are stranded on rooftops or cut off by the floods. The storm hit Nicaragua as a mighty Category 4 hurricane on Tuesday. Eta has since been downgraded to a tropical storm. It is expected to head towards Cuba and possibly the Gulf of Mexico by early next week. European markets are trading mixed as investors await the outcome of the US presidential election. Rising coronavirus cases and new restrictions across the continent have also got investors worried. The pan-European stock 600 fluctuated either side of the flat line. London's FTSE is hovering around the flat line, while Frankfurt's DAX has shed marginally. Paris's CAC 40 has edged down. The FTSE MIB in Italy has also dropped fractionally. Earlier, most Asian markets traded mixed, with all the bourses edging up slightly, with the exception of the mainland Chinese shares. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.